All right, for everybody coming in, we're going to be starting shortly. We're going to start in like 5 minutes.
Cool.
Hey, Adam, you're back. Can you hear us?
Back but frozen.
Oh, no. I'll let him know that he can turn off his video feed. Oh, it looks like he's going to reboot his computer, see if that helps.
Okay.
If not, I'll send him the number that he can call, and he can just call in, or he can try turning off his screen and see if that helps with the connection.
Okay.
Hey, Tori.
What's up?
So I don't know if you noticed this. If you go to participants, they added a bunch of new features.
To the Facebook Live or to the Facebook event?
No, to Zoom.
Oh.
Like head to participant, the participant list in the bottom, and there's a bunch of functions you can have people select, and it'll like pop up in the thing.
Oh, cool.
So you can have them raise their hand, say they need a break, thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, no, faster, slower. It sounds vaguely sexual, but these are all things you can do now.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Too bad I don't have yes or no questions, but it's nice to see the clap.
That would have been very useful for my video lectures.
Yeah, then your teacher doesn't have to call out on you.
Yeah, be like, go slower.
Okay, so I didn't realize this. The video's live, right?
Yep, it's live.
Cool.
Right now, my workshop and me should be the only things showing on screen. So, that doesn't work.
Oh.
Camera off. Just calling in. Is Adam logged in back yet? I don't think I see him on the list.
Not yet, it looks like.
No, okay.
I know my computer's so weird sometimes. I have to restart it just to be able to use AirPods with the computer. So, I mean, it's not a big deal, but.
No, mine's like that too. It does not like me using headphones.
All right.
Yay!
Yay. All right, I'm on my phone, so it seems to be working. I don't know what the heck was going on my computer, but it's been on for a couple days, so I probably just need to reboot. So that's what it's doing right now, but yeah.
No worries. You're coming in loud and clear, and you're not. We can hear you pretty clearly.
Okay, good, because I couldn't hear anything. Everything was just a bunch of clicks, smile to get an
Yep.
image, and I hate when that happens. I'm like, oh, it's the worst. It's just like a Zoom nightmare right there.
And for everybody coming in, we're going to be starting in 1 minute. So, just get comfortable, and we'll be starting shortly. And then for Andy and Adam, I'll have you guys mute until it's your turn to talk, and I'll key you guys in, just so that we don't get the sound from your guys' computer as well in your phone.
Okay. No worries.
Perfect.
Muting now.
Cool. All right, so it's noon, so we'll go ahead and just get started. First off, I'm just going to let you guys know about a few things. First off, when you first come into the meeting, you should be muted. Make sure to just keep yourself muted. I recommend if you have any questions, just go ahead and shout them out. So make sure to press the unmute button, or else we won't be able to hear you. You can also use one of the reactions at the bottom to raise your hand. That will also let us know that you have a question and we can unmute you as well. But just make sure to stay muted during the presentation so that you can hear the host. And if you're on your phone, if you called in for this meeting, just make sure to stay quiet throughout the whole thing, just so that we can hear. And of course, if you have questions, go ahead and just say them out loud. If you haven't noticed already, this is being streamed Facebook Live, so that those who weren't able to make it to the workshop today can still get the information. Of course, only myself and my host are going to be on screen, and my PowerPoint. So if you have a question, your voice will be on camera, but no worries. No one else will be shown on the workshop except for us. All right, let's go ahead and just get into introductions. My name is Tori Soriano. I'm a field organizer with the Nevada Conservation League. I'm also a member of the 5R Revolution of the Sierra Club, the Southern Nevada group. We focus on the 5 R's of sustainability, which are refuse, reuse, reduce, recycle, and rot being composting. And I'd like to introduce my co-host for this event. First up is Andy Davis. Go ahead, Andy.
All right. I am unmuting. All right. My name is Andy Davis, and I'm the president of the UNLV Rebel Roots Garden Club. And we operate out of the 4 garden beds out of 45 in the UNLV Community Garden. And it's about almost my first year anniversary of becoming president. So glad to do this composting workshop to celebrate.
Awesome. Up next, I will have Adam. Go ahead, Adam, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Adam Igwe. I am the farmer owner of Water Rock Farming, which we specialize in hemp-based permaculture, and specifically in the high desert. So we do a lot of regenerative farming work, growing naturally and with industrial hemp, as well as other fruits and vegetables.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adam. It's great that we all 3 are here. We have different perspectives. I consider myself a home composter. Andy has her experience at the university, and Adam is a farmer. So we all come with different experiences, and we're all here to share it with you guys. So this is the agenda for our meeting today. We're going to go over the basics of composting in case you don't know. Andy has a great presentation on the UNLV gardens and talking a little bit about table to compost. Next, we'll go over the 3 compost bins that we're going to be teaching you guys today. And then we'll go over the basics of what each of them entails so that you know what you're getting yourself into when you build one, the pros and cons of each system. We'll go into how to build them and how to maintain them. And I'll talk a little about compost tea, great liquid that will definitely want to be used in your garden. Then we'll go over how to start composting and alternatives if you don't want to build a composter or you don't want one. If we have time, we'll play our composting game where you guys get to sort out things to where they need to be disposed of. And we'll end with conclusions and questions. And of course, if you have any questions throughout this whole presentation, it's interactive. So please just share them out loud and we can get that information to you. So first off, composting, the decomposing and recycling of food, yard, paper, and or animal waste into reusable garden fertilizer. Basically, all the nutrients that's left over in the food scraps or all scraps that we have will then be used in soils and gardens. It's a pretty nice recycling feature. For those of you who are on phone, I'm not going to read all of these facts, but basically I want to let you guys know how bad of a food problem food waste is. In the United States in 2015, we threw over 30 million tons of food waste. And if we look worldwide, that number turns into 1 billion tons. It's a problem that we don't really address nowadays. And I know it can start at farm production and food distribution, but by the time food gets down to the cycle where we're actually going to be eating it, there are ways to help reduce food waste in our landfills. That's the big thing that I want to get in this workshop. So I have Andy's lovely video that we're going to be showing right now. So please stay tuned. It's only 5 minutes and enjoy.
Hello everyone, my name is Andy Davis and I'm the president of the UNLV Rebel Roots Garden Club. And I am so excited to be able to co-host this workshop with Tori Soriano from the Nevada Conservation League and the 5R Revolution for the Sierra Club. And part of the reason why I wanted to pre-record this video in the garden was to sort of serve and add to our purpose of having an interacting composting workshop by being able to take you guys into the garden to show you and model to you effectively what it means to use the 5 R's of sustainability and to kind of show how garden to compost works. All right, so right behind me I have one of the typical composters that you can see at the community garden. And typically my schedule when using this composter, it's my favorite outdoor one, is on a Monday or so, I'll bring in a Tupperware of my frozen food scraps that, that I've created throughout the week cooking. And, I'll just plop it right into here and then make sure, I tend to it, and you'll learn more about this in the composting workshop as well. But, just making sure that things are nice and moist and stirred around so, the decomposition process can happen when you're trying to compost. And so you want to make sure that you have a well mix of both green or nitrogen organic material and brown or carbon material. So you want to plop that and break it up, because the smaller the pieces are, the easier it is to break down. All right, and then toss that. And so regularly, you're going to want to sift this compost to make sure that all of the products are, mixed and incorporated, so you can actually start the process of composting. And so this means stirring all of the organic matter around, flipping it, crunching it up so it can be incorporated, because you can see that down here you see a separation of materials where the most bottom material is good composted soil that is ready to use. On the top you can see all of this brown organic matter or material that is in the process of breaking down. All right, and with these composters behind me, you can see the diversity and the amount of outdoor composters that are available, especially to us at the UNLV garden. And like massive amounts of this organic material that the entire garden has accrued is not enough for just one of these babies to handle. We also rely on using the in-vessel composter, which is just across the fence in the UNLV Rebel Recycling Center, to compost the lag.
Lou? Something's not working.
So
The volume.
basically, all I'm saying in the video is I'm doing tour of all of the different composters and the outdoor composters that, you know, we have available at the UNLV garden. There's so much lag, I don't know why. That's all right, though. It's probably the Zoom. But yeah, you can see that because of this pandemic and no one's been in the garden, the amount of weeds that we have and just overall, you know, garden organic waste has kind of built up. And, you know, so that's one of the reasons why we rely so heavily on the in-vessel composter that's right across the fence. I couldn't take a video of it because, you know, it was chained up and closed, and, you know, no one's still working there right now. But, you know, that's where most of our organic waste from, you know, like just stuff that have died, you know, stuff that has pests in it, those all go into the in-vessel composter. And we've just barely started to get, you know, the outdoor composters on the side of the garden back up and running. And what I was saying in the video is, you know, with all of the weeds that we've kind of built up, you know, with no one being in the garden or being forced to be in the garden and take care of their beds, you wouldn't want to put those inside one of just like the traditional outdoor composters, because there's not enough heat that, you know, happens in those composters to break down the seeds of these weeds. And so basically, you know, if you were to compost those weeds in the outdoor composter, that it would just seed in your compost. So when you put it back into the garden, it's just like you're never going to get those weeds out of your gardening. But with the in-vessel composter, that's, you know, amazing. You can pretty much compost anything just because of how huge it is and how many or how much heat, you know, builds up through that composting. So like, for example, you know, bamboo toothbrushes that they say are compostable, you could never put that in, you know, just like a personal or outdoor composter because there's not enough heat required to break it down. So for the in-vessel composter, you know, stuff like those, you know, biodegradable products that you know, companies sell, as well as like meat, bones, pretty much you can throw anything that's supposed to be composted into that composter, and it turns out beautiful compost that, you know, we use in conjunction with Star Nursery soil. You know, it's like half and half of the garden compost that, you know, is collected from the UNLV community garden and other patrons such as myself that just drop off food scraps every week or so. But, you know, that's kind of reserved for people who are a part of the UNLV community garden. But, you know, we're trying to expand, but it's hard, you know, without proper composting education. You know, people are throwing, you know, plastic, you know, single-use plastics inside the compost sorting in the student union. So it's impossible to sift through all of it. But, you know, we're looking to creating more solutions for that. But I think you muted yourself, Tori.
Thank you, Andy. Did you want me to continue to play your video?
It's fine. I was just gonna show the garden beds, but they're looking pretty rough now anyway.
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you for your input as well. And I know you mentioned a little bit about what to do before composting as well. Did you want to mention that as well?
Oh yes, of course. So I talked about in the video about how different ways that you know, the 5 R's apply to gardening, and you know, I'm gonna go out of order off the top of my head, but you know, one of them is to reuse. And so pretty much all of the gardening beds in the community gardens that are made of wood are actually reclaimed wood that, you know, were otherwise going to be deposited into a landfill. So we have, you know, not only are most of our garden beds, you know, built out of reclaimed wood and bricks and whatnot, but you know, when gardening, you want to make sure that you only plant, you know, what you know that you'll eat, or, you know, so food waste isn't a problem even in your personal gardening. But, you know, I'm lucky enough that I have the ability to share, you know, my garden bounty with other club members. And, you know, I recently started donating some of the garden materials to the UNLV food pantry, and they're getting their office up and running as well. But between the UNLV food pantry, myself, who is a home cook, you know, I love creating new recipes and stuff, but, you know, that comes at the cost of making sure you only plant what you need. So I think my first year gardening, I had planted an entire half bed of basil, went on vacation, and then came back, and just like the bounty was, I had never expected that it was going to get like that. So, you know, making sure you only plant what you need. And then I wanted to mention as well, you know, when we're trying to cut down and reduce on food waste, an example, which we'll talk about in this slide, is, you know, some farmers will donate their food scraps to feed farm animals. And I don't know if any of you have been to the Gilcrease Orchard, which is, you know, up north, but I work there every fall, and, you know, it's pumpkin season there. And so a lot of pumpkins don't get picked up or, you know, get tossed because they don't look perfect for fall or autumn pictures. And, you know, what farmers like Gilcrease will do, and I've had the pleasure of doing it before as well, but they'll bring all of these, you know, unwanted produce, and the chickens just love it. You know, that definitely helps cut down on lots of stinky pumpkins and, you know, just overall garden produce being, you know, thrown away. And yeah, that's all I could think about right now. But, you know, in general, besides composting, a lot of the R's apply directly to gardening.
Thank you, Andy. You pretty much covered this whole slide I have up about making sure to follow the 5 R's before composting, you know, reducing your waste as much as you can before composting. I had a question in the chat. Can we ask questions in the chat? The answer is yes. Please do type them out, and we'll see if we can get them answered throughout the presentation. So compost should be the last step you do when trying to reduce your food waste. But in the event that food waste does happen, or it's inedible food that you cannot eat, composting is a great alternative than throwing it in a landfill. So these are the 3 composting methods I'm going to go over. There is a 4th one called the berry method. We're not going to talk about it much just because it's not a bin we're going to be building. It literally is a hole in the ground you dig and you throw your food scraps in, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to just cover traditional compost, vermicomposting, and bokashi. So first off, I'm going to go over each of them so you know what they are beforehand, before you build them, and the pros and cons to each. So we'll start with a traditional backyard composter. This is what farmers use. This is, you know, basic setup where you throw your food waste in a backyard composter. It can spin around like this one, or just be a trash can like the one I'm going to be showing you how to build later on today. Pros and cons of this one. So pros, you can compost large quantities at a time. You can have multiple bins, but the bigger the bin, the more you can compost, the more waste you can recycle. And if done correctly, you can create wonderful compost with all the materials, and you can actually sell it as a business. I know a lot of farmers use livestock manure to create a lot of compost, but if you get great at it, you may be able to have it as a side business. The cons, labor intensive. You saw Andy using her stick to turn it and spin it around and move it around. You got to make sure to do that often, keep it wet, layer the materials. So it's much more labor intensive than the other 2. Does require a backyard and space not next to the house. There's a reason I don't have this version in my home. It's because I have one of the tiny Las Vegas backyards. And my household is afraid of attracting other decomposers into the system and next to my house. So definitely recommended for a backyard and having space dedicated for it. It could also attract pests. The system works with microbials coming in and other decomposers to help decompose your waste, but that also means other pests can enter the system. There's bug netting if you can put it around the holes if you're worried, but just know that pests can enter the system. It could take a significant amount of time to decompose. We don't have this problem because we don't really have cold winters, but a lot of times you can't compost in certain weather because it doesn't get hot enough. So compost can take anywhere from 3 months to 1 or 2 years to fully break down. It might smell. It's very important to have a good layer of, you know, like what Andy said, carbon material, which is paper, versus nitrogen material, your food scraps. The more paper material you have, the better it can handle the smell. And you have to sort your food waste. You can't compost anything. So this is my quick list of what you cannot compost. Some of it's debatable between composters. But for a backyard composter, they definitely recommend no meat, milk products, or bones. Those will rot and attract pests. Onions and citrus rinds are debatable, but they say it's too acidic. Weeds, you can compost weeds. Weeds are allowed, but the thing is, if you don't kill off the spores with the heat and backyard composter won't get hot enough, it will spread weeds to your garden, and no one wants a full garden of weeds. Oil, food, once again, it'll attract pests or just drain out. Grains are debatable. A lot of people say it may attract pests, it may just get too mushy, may enter new bacteria into the system that you don't want. You could test it out if you want, but the debate is on if whether you should put grains in there or not. Don't put anything toxic in your composter. This includes paper, treated paper, color paper, wood ash, anything that you would not want to ingest, you should not put in your garden. And that goes the same with food and human and pet waste. All of these have disease risks that you don't want to enter into your garden system. So please avoid doing it. There are ways to do it properly, but for a home composter, I would not recommend it. All right, vermicomposting. This is a worm composter. It could be like this fancy tray stacking one, or just a big bin, or a bucket. This is how mine started out at first, but basically it's a home for your worms. Pros, it's super easy to make and maintain. It was my very first compost bin I made. Very simple for me to set up. The worms will turn their bedding into worm castings, which is their poop, but they will do that within 2 to 3 months. So once you get them out of that worm casting, you can use it immediately. And because the worms are going to be doing this year round, you pretty much have compost year round, no weather issues on that front. For an indoor worm bin, it can be small enough to sit under your sink if you have the tray version, or in your closet. I had a 5-gallon bucket that just sat in my closet. It's pretty easy. Shouldn't smell, should smell like dirt, just like what the worms are going to be rolling around. And as long as the food is buried, it should not attract pests. Dig it deeper if you're worried. You can also put bug netting if you're worried as well. Worm castings, if you don't have a garden, can be sprinkled in parks. They're all safe for use, and a lot of gardeners love it. So you can sell it as a side business if you want. And kids love worms. If you want to do a great project with them, I recommend having a worm bin. It's a cool experiment. Cons, you got to buy some worms. This whole workshop is about making your own compost bin, but the worms are the one cost you really can't make yourself. If you have a wormery or know someone who has a vermicomposter started, you can get starter worms from them. But if not, you will have to buy them. And the cheapest I found is $30 per pound. Definitely recommend making your own bin because the cheapest one I found was over $80. So always try to look for cost-effective ways to reduce your food waste. And you got to change the bedding every 2 to 3 months, which means you literally take out the worms, sort out the worm castings, and put them in new bedding. I'll give you tips on how to do that later, but just note that's something you have to do every 2 to 3 months. And last but not least, you can't compost all food scraps. So here's my list for vermicomposting. It's very similar to the last list. I might have taken some things out that are debatable, but pretty much everything that you can't put in a traditional composter can't go in a vermicomposter. The only things that are different is grains. Grains are debatable. Some people's worms just don't eat grains, don't eat bread. So experiment and see if yours are the type that like it or dislike it. And then spicy foods. Worms actually can sense the taste of spice just like we can, and they will actively avoid it if they have the choice. So try not to give them too many spicy foods or else they're not going to like that. Last but not least, we got bokashi. Bokashi, most of you maybe have never heard of this. It's a Japanese term meaning fermented organic matter. You are literally taking your food scraps, sprinkling this bran on top, sealing the container, and keeping it in an anaerobic environment with no extra water or air. And it will literally ferment your food scraps. Bokashi itself is a mixture of bran, wheat, molasses and microorganisms. I know Adam has actually experienced making his own. I just bought mine from Amazon. If you want to touch base on that really quick, Adam, we'd love to hear your DIY experience.
Yeah, Bokashi is great. I use it in my farm. I use it when I'm growing anything, fruits, vegetables, tomatoes, cover crops. The main thing that I use, a little bit goes a long way. So what I use is just a 5-gallon bucket, actually 2 of them stacked together with a series of holes in the screen, with the first being with the hole in the screen located at the direct bottom of the bucket, and then filled with the food scraps. So when you layer it, you want to do the food scraps, then Bokashi, and then smash. Smashing is when you just like push it down. What I realized using really well is like a plastic bag or anything like that, because you don't want any sort of air to come into contact with your Bokashi that you're making, since Bokashi is considered as anaerobic, or where most like composting is aerobic, meaning that you want oxygen. Anaerobic thrives very well with no oxygen, which is a rare type of thing because usually that causes problems to have. But Bokashi, it needs to have no oxygen in order to grow and develop right. So you always add the food in, put the bran down, and then smash, and then just layer it like a souffle. And over time, it will start to ferment the food and the scraps and everything. And that works at the best too. And then at the bottom, there's a spout, the second bucket, excuse me. So the second bucket has a spigot on there, which I can even show. It has a little spigot. This is my little setup here. The spigot itself, we unscrew. I don't have anything in there. And then the Bokashi would just pour right out. And then this is the first bucket that I have here, which is currently full of stuff that I'm going to turn into Bokashi. This is just some hemp leaves, actually. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but you can see a screen inside there, and then there's a series of holes in there, and it's just a stacked bucket. So most materials is going to cost you maybe like 15, 20 bucks, and it's quick and easy to do. Again, using like maybe a teaspoon of it per, 2 to 3 gallons, and then you put that inside any sort of filtration system that you have, and have it feed to your crop. There's a lot of different things that you could use, such as called Venturi systems that could attach directly to your water line, and using those will help you to be able to feed the Bokashi tea into the field, as well as any other composting teas that you want to do. You can find those about 15, 20 bucks. I might have one. I'm actually in my shop hanging around here, which I do. This is a kind of cool one that connects directly to like a normal little garden hose. You can put that onto it as a male and a female connection port. That's about 1/2 inch, which is the size that you need, as well as a little like feeding tube here. And this is what you would stick into the bucket. So you just do something like that, just in there, and then it'll feed it and use vacuum pressure to suck it up. So it goes a long ways with the Bokashi tea. It works great for.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. He's been doing this for his farm, and I've been doing it for my backyard. So we're both, doing it and learning at the same time. So it's definitely an experience.
Exactly.
I have a couple of questions in the chat. Looks like Mandy asked, can you explain repurposing food waste? So I put that down because, like for instance, my lemon rinds, I use that to make cleaning products. I have it soak in vinegar so that I can get the lemon vinegar for my cleaning products. I also
say lemons and oranges for.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, lemons and oranges. My ad was going to be oranges. Sometimes I use orange peels as a way to like what's the word for it? Like a natural aerosol or something like that for my car. With the heat that comes in my car, I use orange peels to make sure that it doesn't, smell like hot car.
Exactly. I also like put in my garbage disposal little pieces to help make that smell better as well. So I just always recommend Googling before you throw anything, saying, how can I repurpose this, or how can I utilize my food scraps if you can't replant them or have no further use to that. And We have a few questions about the actual compost bins. I'm going to go over how to make them more in depth in a second. And then if you still have further questions, I will answer them. But let me go over the pros and cons of bokashi really quick. So it's easiest way to compost. I mean, Adam said it, got a bucket, drain it, layer it with your food scraps in the bran, close it, pretty much it. It creates usable compost within a few months. Compost is a loose term because it's just fermenting your food scraps. If you open the bucket, you'll literally see your food scraps still. But you can bury it and you can decompose it within a few months afterwards. Easy to make and maintain. I have one. I've been doing it for a year now. Pretty simple instructions, and it's inexpensive to make. Adam said himself, $15 max to DIY yourself some bokashi. And you don't need to sort your food scraps. Almost everything that you want to throw away or dispose of can be thrown in the bokashi fermenter. So if it doesn't work in your other composters, more than likely it'll work in this one, and I'll tell you which ones don't. The cons, the bokashi has like a sweet fermented smell. Adam can think what his opinion on the smell is. It shouldn't smell bad, but it does smell like, I've described like fermented beer or fermented corn, or what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's like a wine kind of vinaigrette smell that you'll have there. Usually sweet. If you have anything like fruits in there, it's gonna have a nice sweet smell to it. If it smells rancid, which I don't know if you guys know what rancid smells like, but it's like a dead body. It's disgusting and it's repulsive. Do not use that. You better be safe than sorry. You don't want to put something on your plants that's going to end up giving it disease or even potentially killing it. So be very, nose prone to sensing and smelling your bokashi all the time. So definitely.
Exactly. And if something goes wrong for all of these systems and you start smelling bad, rotten smells, I'm going to give you tips afterwards to help combat those smells as well. So, but it always should smell like, sweet vinegary, sweet pickles, a sweet smell, and you'll get used to the smell. You will see old food in white mold. Like the other systems, these are not going to decompose. So you're going to see your old food scraps sitting on top. And mold is not something that can happen, but if you see white mold, that's a good sign things are happening. So if you do not like mold or you do not like seeing your old food, then this may not be a system for you. And I was asked, and I'll go over your question, Richa, after I go over what's down here. So you cannot easily sell or give away compost from bokashi. A lot of people don't know about it. You can add it to other compost bins, but most people aren't familiar enough to know that you can. So I don't really have any places right now where you can donate it. You can donate it to me if you don't have a backyard. You can also just bury it in a pot of soil and let that sit. And then once that's usable, compost, and compost, and you can sprinkle it on parks or donate it to gardeners. But the actual fermented bokashi items, you cannot really have a way to dispose of it afterwards very easily. And you have to completely bury the compost afterwards for it to break down finally. It can't be sit on top or sprinkled on top like worm castings or compost. You literally have to bury it to decompose it or feed it to your worms. But it cannot, because of all these limitations, you may not have a use for bokashi. So if you don't have a use for your bokashi scraps, please let me know. But it just may not work out for some people. All right. This
bokashi.
Plant compost with a bokashi fermenter. Oily foods and liquids, pretty much all of these, they will putrefy the system, leave more oil and liquid in there. That's what you do not want. There's a debate about blue, black, and green molds. So if you see these colors of mold in your bokashi bin, that's a sign of putrefaction and a sign of rotting. It may come with a smell. Some say that if you put a moldy piece of bread in your bokashi composter, it may expose the system. I haven't tested it out enough. I didn't want to risk it. So it may not just be good to add that mold into the system. And then paper and yard waste. No carbon materials needed in the system. All it is nitrogen material. I will say there is a way later on that you can add paper in to help soak things up. But it is not needed. You don't need paper or yard waste technically in the system. All right, so we're gonna go over building the compost bins. I'm just gonna show you the basic setups of each. The way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna go over one step and then show how to do it for each of the composters. So if the step is hole drilling, I'll talk about each of them, but it should be very simple. Let me just switch my camera view for a second. All right, so you want to do a traditional composter? This is my traditional composter. It's just a trash pan, trash bucket, garbage bin, whatever it is. Open it up, it's nice and clean, ready to go. My worm bin is outdoors. It's technically outside right now, so I couldn't show you guys my worm bin. I did bring some of my worms though, so you could see what they look like. Let me see if I can find a worm. They're all buried in, but yeah, you can see. There's my little red wiggler worm, or two. But before it was outdoors and in my garden, it would just started out like this. 2 buckets. I had holes drilled at the bottom if it was super liquidy that I can drain inside here, but I never had a drainage problem, so it didn't actually drain any liquid out. But we got 2 buckets and a lid. My Bokashi composter, which is very similar to Adam's, and I actually have this to help seal it up, this little bungee cord. But all it is an igloo drinking water container. Pretty simple. I have a car wash filter or a grit guard at the bottom to help keep the solids on top and the liquid on the bottom. I just put some bug netting, that's what I had. You can put fabric on here or paper towels, whatever, just to keep the solids on top and the liquid on the bottom. I drain the liquid with the little spigot right here, and I'll open it up so you guys can see what it looks like. I have my covering plate is cardboard so that it helps suck up the liquid, the condensation, and it pushes all the air out and keeps air from coming into the system. But this is what a Bokashi composter is going to look like. I don't know if you guys can see very well, but it looks like my scraps and some bran. Pretty nasty. And some white mold, if you could see that. Anyway, let me put that back in. The first step is hole drilling. And if you don't have a drill, I'm going to show you how to do it without drilling holes for all of these. So for your traditional composter, drill holes all the way around, 6 inches apart. Do about a ½ inch. You could do it smaller if you're worried about pests getting through, or put bug netting on the inside. But just drill holes all around. Drill holes at the.
What happened?
What was that? Okay. You can drill holes at the bottom to allow that liquid to drain out. If you want to keep the liquid, put like a basin or another container on here, but just make sure to put holes all around the bin. You don't need to worry about the lid. If you don't have a drill or you don't want to stab your bin, just keep the lid open. The lid will allow air to pass through. Just make sure to turn it, stab it with the shovel, but bigger. Stab it in to allow air to flow through. You can also poke at it to create air pockets, or you could put pieces of bigger cardboard or things like that to help aerate the system, add little air pockets. And instead of turning, you can also do is when you have the lid on, you can spin it. Spinning it aerates the system as well, and it allows things to mix very well as well. So wouldn't recommend filling it to the top, but that's how you put holes in your traditional composter. Holes for your worm bin. Really, you could put holes at the bottom if you're worried about lots of liquid food so that it drains out. But if not, you want holes at least on the lid. I had one that had holes in it, but I lost it. Put holes on the lid so the worms get air. Doesn't have to be super big, like 1/4 of an inch, just all around the bin. You can put bug netting or any filtering material on top if you're worried about pests. But that's pretty much it. If you don't have a drill or you don't want to ruin your buckets by drilling them, just keep the lid off slightly so that air can pass through. You can also make a makeshift lid with cardboard or any material like this to allow air to pass through as well. Put bug netting on there to cover the holes. For bokashi, this is how my very first bokashi bin was, kind of how Adam said. 2 buckets, holes at the bottom to allow it to drain. The drainage holes, I would recommend 1/4 of an inch. If you make them bigger, that just means that more liquid can come out. But you definitely want to put some filtering material like the screen that was showing on Adam's, just to help make sure nothing falls through. Liquid will fall in here, and then you drain it out every 2 to 3 days. If you don't have a drill and you still want to do bokashi, you can also just put paper material at the bottom of the bin. 2 layers of newspaper. If you don't have newspaper, put lots of layers of cardboard or paper material. That will soak up the liquid and keep it from putrefying. You can put more paper as you layer your food scraps, but just make sure to have it be able to absorb your liquid and not putrefy. That's what I would recommend. You may also put a plastic bag in here and try putting holes in that. I was recommended that, never tried it, but that might be easier to drill holes in than a bucket. All right, so we got holes. Now we need paper material. So we got egg cartons. Paper towel rolls work very well. All this waste paper you get from Amazon deliveries, these are perfect to go in all of your bins. So for your traditional composter, you can put woody material at the bottom if you want to help aerate the system and soak up the liquid. But your first layer is going to be paper. Make sure to shred it. You want to shred it and rip it into small pieces so that it breaks down faster. First layer, paper material, carbon material. Next, you're going to put your food scraps. After that, you're going to put paper material on top again. If it smells, you can smell your food waste, put more paper material on top. That will help combat the smell. Then you want to liquefy the system. You want it to be like a wrung out sponge, not too wet, not too dry. Make sure that it keeps that moisture for the microbes. And that's pretty much it. For my worm bin, their bedding, what they're going to be living inside of is this paper material. All that material is what they're going to be living in. So you're going to shred your egg cartons, your cardboard, your paper, not colored paper, just black and white paper, and put that inside. I also use coconut core. Coconut core kind of looks like this. It's coconut fibers. Works great in water retention. That's probably why I had no liquid draining. But you want a good mix of all this paper material that will help absorb anything and have the worms something to bury in. So put the worms in. Once the bedding's made, give them 1 day to bury and then start feeding them. You're going to want to dig a little pocket for them, a little deep pocket, put the food scraps in, rebury it, and that's pretty much it. You'll do that once a week. Make sure that they eat it before you feed them again, but that's it. For bokashi, Adam already explained this, but I'll go over it again. You'll open up the lid, get your covering material out, and then you will put your bokashi down first. Bokashi should be the bottom layer, good layer of bokashi. And then you will put your food scraps next. About 2-inch layer of food scraps, put that in, smash it. I use a potato smasher to smash it down, but whatever you got to smash it will be fine. Put your covering plate or your piece of cardboard in, push out all the air, push out all the moisture, seal it up. That's pretty much it. You'll do that once a week and drain out your liquid every 2 to 3 days. And those are the basic ideas of composting for these 3 sets. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to add to my tutorial while I switch over here?
Yeah, I like to say something, Tori, really quick about the smashing. I was doing what you were doing, using like the cardboard, but I was realizing I still had like air pockets inside the cardboard and everything. And the best way to deal with bokashi and make sure that you don't really get much any sort of like extra molds or mildews or anything like that might be grown in there besides that white mold of bokashi that you're gonna want. Is using like a plastic bag, like a 13-gallon plastic bag. If you just put that in there, you could get that all the air out using that type of thing, and then just putting the lid on top of it. It's very convenient. Everyone always has like 13-gallon plastic bags around, and you can keep reusing that same plastic bag over and over again, even after you do it. So after I saw that and I started to do it and I applied it to myself, it was just like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was just like, yeah, this is definitely the way to do it. So just wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I use cardboard is because the last time when my bokashi failed, it does fail, was because of water condensation. So I use that to soak up all the liquid. But I definitely recommend a paper bag, plastic bag, anything that will cover it up. And you can use multiple layers too, like put as much as you can to help stop that oxygen reaching the food. So I had a couple of questions. Let's see.
Tori,
Yeah,
do you mind starting with the first question? I wasn't sure how to answer, but I remember that you mentioned that sometimes it might be useful to save the liquids from a traditional composter.
yeah, so I'm actually going to go over that in my next slide. So all questions on the liquid from all three systems are going to be answered in the following slide after this. But it looks like I have a question. Let's see. Can I show you how to take out the bokashi tea in my bucket system? Unfortunately, I can't because I didn't want any liquid draining during my presentation by accident. I actually dripped it out before, but it's really simple. I mean, I just tip it over. Hit the tap, and it drains out. The holes are all, the whole system. Like if you do 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, it doesn't really matter the sizing as long as it drains out for bokashi. I think I did 1/4 of an inch at first, but I didn't have that filtering material and it jammed. So definitely I would recommend bigger holes and just a lot of filtering material just to help pass that liquid through. Let's see, if you don't have a, let's see, yeah, if you don't have a spigot, you can definitely it'll drain into the second bucket. You just lift it up and drain it out. You could put a spigot if you want, if you're fancy, or a little stopper, just like Adam has. But if not, then you'll have to just take out the bucket, pour it out, put the bucket back in. You should definitely shred all of your food scraps, all your cardboard, everything in all three systems. Definitely keep it, the smaller it is, the faster it decomposes. And for bokashi, the smaller it is, the less air gets through. So please make sure to cut that up as best as you can. And I had a question about temperatures. So for the traditional composter, you want it to get as hot as possible. They recommend covering it with black sheeting to help with the heat as well. But you can keep that outside in sunny areas, recommended for that. For your worm bin and your bokashi, you definitely want to keep those temperatures normal range. For my worm bin, it's insulated, but you want to make sure to keep that to where it's comfortable for the worms. If it's comfortable for you, it's comfortable for the worms. If not, they will die. And they do not like sunlight, so you cannot keep them out in the sun.
One thing, Tori, that I wanted to say that my first experience with vermicomposting, you can definitely tell when it is way too hot for your worms because you will start to see them trying to climb up the sides of it and, exit through the holes. And I made the mistake of keeping my vermicomposting bin in the garage one summer, just because my mom wasn't comfortable having it in the house. So definitely don't do that, especially in Vegas or, any desert climates with the heat and the way that it packs in. All the worms tried to crawl up to escape from the heat. So it's like, you got to make sure that the environment that you create for them inside their bin, is, enough for them to want to stay there.
So yeah, in terms of temperature for all of these compost bins, the bokashi as well, mine spoiled because I kept it in my garage and it got too hot still. So just keep it at a normal temperature as well. I had a question. If we go electric, is it wasteful with the filters you have to exchange out?
They're referring to the electric composts, and then the link that I was transported to was like a tiny little cube that's an electric composter that's like $300 or something, and I think it just requires filters. I don't know too much about electric composters, but
Yeah, honestly, I have no idea either. I'm mostly a home composter, so I'm teaching these compost methods. I don't know anything about electric composting, but I can get you that information soon. All right, so let me go back to my PowerPoint. Hopefully I answered all of your questions. If not, please share them out loud, and I'll try to get them as quickly as I can. So for the normal composter, you can see this one's exactly how I described. You got some holes. They put holes in their lids if you want. And the layering between carbon material and nitrogen material. My worm bin started like this with some holes in the top and a way to drain it out. Worms inside, comfy in their bin. This example has autumn leaves as their base, but it could be a lot of paper, coconut coir, whatever you got. And then Adam already explained his bokashi example. These are his pictures from his setup as well. And he had these pictures. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to go over them, but these are his worms in his worm bin. And then these are some fungi that broke up or came up in his bokashi. So these are his pictures from his farm. And hopefully later on we have some time to go over them. I'm going to talk about compost tea. So the liquid from the backyard composter, if you keep it, the liquid from the worm bin, if you keep it, and the bokashi liquid that you must make sure to drain out or suck up, all of that is called compost tea. It's a concentrated fertilizer of nutrients and microorganisms. This liquid gold is an excellent source of nutrients in plants and gardens alike. The way you use it is you dilute it in water. 1 teaspoon per gallon of water. That's all you need, and it'll go a long way. And you'll pour it directly on your garden within a day or two of dilution. So just mix it together, pour it directly on your house plants or your garden. Your plants will love this. And if you don't have a garden, you can pour it down your pipes to promote a healthy sewage system. That's what I did before this started. I poured them down my sink. So if you want to start composting, start off by storing your food scraps. Andy touched base on this before. We both just keep a sealed Tupperware with our items. I keep mine in the fridge because I dump it once a week in my composters. She keeps it in the freezer for UNLV. You can even keep it under the sink if it's not too hot, but make sure to freeze your food scraps if you want them to be kept longer than 2 weeks.
And for the garden, when I, keep my food scraps in the freezer, the reason I freeze them is because I have to, take 30 minutes to drive to school. And in that time period, I don't want to be, dealing with the stinky, smell of food rotting in my car while I drive to the garden. And I make sure that, either to bring my Tupperware with the frozen food scraps straight to the garden, or I'll either transfer it to like a brown paper bag or something that's easily compostable so that the whole container can just go straight in the compost. But
Good idea.
Yeah, you can also use biodegradable compostable gags. I got a question. Do banana peels compost well? As always, yes, they can. You got to just make sure to shred them. For my worms, for example, they will not eat banana peels if I cut them into like 1-inch squares. They have to be tiny. So make sure to always just shred and cut your foods, which will bring me to this point. Make sure to shred and cut your food scraps, your paper, your yard waste, all into smaller pieces. The smaller it is, the quicker it decomposes. You can use a blender to shred it, but don't liquefy it. For bones, for bokashi, if you don't have a bone grinder or some way to make them smaller, I heard that boiling them helps break them down faster, but bones will also take a very long time to compost. Just keep that in mind. And then make sure to get rid of your plastic non-compostable items, your fruit stickers, your plastic wrapping. Very important to get rid of those out of your system. Let's see, we got another question. Potatoes.
Potatoes are great, and so are potato peels.
Yeah, potatoes are great to compost. I will say for a worm composter, sometimes you actually get the potato peels growing more potatoes before my worms eat it. So it's kind of funny. You can see little sprouts. You'll get that with fungi. You'll get that, I think, with tomato seeds. There's some other things might start growing before they actually start composting.
And at that point, you could just transfer it straight to a garden or a pot.
Exactly. So the next things, I'm not going to go over too much just because we're running out of time. I'm going to be sending you guys a little guide to help when things, after the bin is made, to help with the composting process. It might answer a lot of your questions, and it will give you tips if it starts to smell and how to combat with that smell problem. Smell would be like rotting food or putrefaction. Those are never good signs for your compost bins, and I have tips to help you with that, and as well as what you can and cannot compost for each of these 3 methods. So keep an eye out for your email, and I will send those afterwards. Really quick, I'm going to mention alternatives to composting if you don't want to build one or you don't have the capability to do so. I know Andy mentioned UNLV has compost bins. I know a lot of university extensions have opportunities for composting. So if you want more information, please talk to her if you are a UNLV student. There are other gardeners and composters out there. There's a website called sharewaste.com. It shows people on a map of what they accept and what they want to get donated to their composters. Usually it's vegans, food scraps. But if you see anybody in that network, you can see if you can donate to them. There is a food scrap pickup service here in Las Vegas. It's called Viva La Compost. I'm not sponsored in any way, but they will give you a bin and pick up your food scraps and compost it for you for a fee. Last but not least, a lot of farmers markets. Some farmers will take your food scraps and feed them to the farm animals and compost them themselves. So if you know any farmers out there who are willing to take the food scraps after quarantine and we're all, all things are better, please let me know, and I can definitely get that information out to people. All right. I don't know if we have enough time for my composting game, unfortunately. But if you want to stick around, we can play a round or two for everyone who wants to play. But let me fast forward. Nobody cheating. Everyone, just kidding. I'll turn off stop share. I'll fast forward it, and we'll sign off for our workshop, and then we'll finish off with the game. But before we sign off, does anybody have any further questions or anything else they want to suggest or share in terms of composting? Looks like, let me see. Looks like I don't see any questions.
A little bit when you guys are done. Maybe help you pull that trailer out.
Oh,
I can't do it.
So I have a question. In a standard outdoor compost bin, what's the best way to collect the liquid? I'll be using a storage tote. I've seen it. I mean, it depends. I don't know if you have any suggestions, Adam or Andy. I've seen it where it's just a basin that sits right on top of the composter with bricks on top. I do know then that liquid is then exposed to pests, and it might attract pests. You can also just try getting a storage tote that fits exactly over the storage tote, and kind of like the bucket system, drain it out, every 2 to 3 days, and that hopefully that tight fit between each storage tote should help combat pests.
What kind of comes to mind, not that I've had the opportunity to do this, but if you kind of think of like a rainwater collection system, but at the bottom where the liquid drains out, and maybe to repurpose like PVC pipes or something so that the liquid isn't too exposed to the open air, and kind of like with the bokashi system, how you turn the spigot and then the liquid would come out at the bottom. There's a way that you could probably stop it to where it doesn't so it's just not exposed to the air, and it's just easier to get out, kind of like a rainwater collection dish, or I'm not sure.
I mean, as far as what my experience would go is if it's standard and it's already set and it's not jacked up, like the way you guys are explaining, and there's no way to actually catch the tea, then you're not really going to be able to catch any sort of compost tea that way. However, not all is lost. What you can do is take some of your compost that's been there for a while, like a small amount, maybe about a handful, and then you could put it in a like maybe some sort of like sock or nylon, and then tie it up, put it in somewhere, put it into a bucket of water, and then put a bubbler inside there, which is like something you can find at like a pet store that has like that you put in a fish tank. And what that would do is add oxygen to that water, and then you could bubble that. And then if you do that for about a day or two, then you have developed a aerobic bacteria environment and increased type of microbes that thrive well on that. And then that's a compost tea in itself. And that stuff is really great as a foliar spray. So if you wanted to boost like your plants, if they're having some sort of issues, you could spray on the foliar, and the plants love that stuff just as much as they love bokashi too. But it's taking instead of a anaerobic environment and putting it into an aerobic environment. So the microbes might not last long, but while they're there, they do take care of a lot of pests and problems.
Definitely. I've also heard that if you don't, because a traditional composter, hopefully it's never getting that wet. So like I said, it may not be very feasible to collect the liquid from that. But I've also heard that if you just take banana peels and keep them in a gallon of water or more and let them, sit out for 10 days, that creates some compost tea in a way as well, that you can utilize for your garden. But the worm bin, I didn't have much luck catching a lot of liquid. It was mostly just bokashi that I got the compost tea with.
Well, in general, you don't want the worm bins to be too moist, right? Just kind of damp.
So for all of these systems, for these the worm bin and the compost bin should be like a wrung out sponge, not too wet, not too dry, just moist. So always keep that in mind. Does anybody have any further questions? You can speak them out loud if you want, or you can type them in the chat. All right. Well, I'm going to sign us off then. But once again, you can stick around longer if you have further questions as they come up. I have these resources. I used these when I first started learning about composting and figuring things out. Most of them are from the USDA or Cornwall. So I will send that out in an email afterwards for those who have attended. But for the Sierra Club, make sure to consider supporting the Sierra Club. We're one of the largest environmental groups in the world, most well known, and I think they're a really good group to support. So you can check out their website, and I'll send this in a follow-up email. You can also follow the Facebook group Sierra Club Southern Nevada Group, and you can check out the 5R Revolution, which is the committee I'm a part of, that we focus on the 5 R's of sustainability. For the Nevada Conservation League, we have a petition going out, and it's supposed to help with COVID-19. We want to make sure those bailouts don't go to oil industries or fracking industries. We want to make sure the money goes to the people who most need it. So I'm going to get that petition out if you're willing to sign. You can also check our Facebook group for Nevada Conservation League and Instagram, just to find out, keep updated on our events. This presentation will actually be on our Facebook, so if you want to reference it for later, definitely will be available. Looks like I have a question. Oh no, I have a thank you. Thank you. We also have an event next Saturday at 1 p.m. Reach up for the 5R Revolution. I think you're here today. Thank you for getting out this documentary called The Story of Plastic. It's going to be a really great viewing. And for the Nevada Conservation League, we're having a watch party on it next Saturday from 1 to 3. If you want to join us in, and we can have a discussion afterwards. But the Sierra Club is having a post-screening discussion the following day, Sunday, May 17th at 11 p.m. And if you want to join on that as well, we'll get you that information. But definitely would love to see you watching this documentary alongside with us. All right, I'm going to have Andy sign off for Rebel Roots. Go ahead, Andy.
So anyone that goes to UNLV, any clubs or organizations that would like to get in contact with my club, the UNLV Rebel Roots, or the UNLV Community Garden in a whole, you can follow them. And this is where we post any garden events that we might have, and any meetings that I might have going on. And you can also click the link at the bottom for the involvement center, and that's the way that you can get in contact with my organization. And right now we're just kind of restricting meetings for and garden beds for people that go to UNLV. However, I have been known to collaborate with other organizations like the Nevada Conservation League. So I can still do other things with different organizations, and you can get in contact with me there.
Awesome. I had a typo in the past. The Sierra Club discussions at 11 a.m., not 11 p.m. Keep that in mind. All right. Now I got Adam, my last co-host. Go ahead and sign yourself off.
All right. Yeah. One of the things I forgot to mention in the introduction is we also do livestock here. So we're using goats and chicken manure a lot in our compost as well. You can check out more information about how I farm and what we do around here at waterrockfarming.com, or you could also follow me in social media. That's at Igwe's Hemp Farm. It's my last name, IGWE, and it's plural, Igwe's Hemp Farm. And yeah, that's Instagram and Facebook as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. So, cool. So I want to thank you guys for being great co-hosts, and thank you for stopping by. I do have one more question before we end off. Looks like it was from T Money on Facebook. He said, why we want to keep liquid away from a traditional compost. For all of these systems, the Bokashi system is the only one that you want to keep liquid away from, just because that is an anaerobic system. We don't want any water or air added additionally. For a traditional composter and a vermicomposter, those ones you need to keep like a wrung out sponge, not too wet, not too dry, because the microbes, they will need water to live as well. So you could put more water into the system. I've heard that wastewater, so like water that you boil for your noodles, you can put it in your composter as well. But just make sure to have it be able to drain out, or else all of that liquid is going to drown the microbes. So hopefully that answered your question. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for attending. If there's anyone else that wants to stick around and play the composting game, we can definitely do that. But if not, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you learned a lot, and hopefully you want to start composting.
Yes, thank you. Do you want to just get
Thanks,
started?
Tori. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Adam. Thank you.
Cool.
Thought we do the composting game.
Let's do the composting game.
Yeah.
All right. Let me just go back a few slides. Oh, wait, I don't want you guys to cheat. So let me go back a few slides myself.
Yeah, this compost game is one that I actually did with prospective students for UNLV, and they were just as confused on a lot of them too. So
yeah, and just to put a tidbit, Andy gave me this game, and then I improvised it, changed it a little bit for Nevada, because Nevada doesn't have a lot of recycling abilities in other states, and I changed it to work with all three of our bins that we talked about. Hold on, I have a question. Can you compost frozen food? The answer is yes. For some systems, you'll want to get them thawed out before you do it. For instance, a worm bin, the worms aren't going to be able to penetrate hard frozen food as easily as normal food. But yeah, you can definitely compost frozen food. For all of the food, you want to make sure that it's at least shredded as well.
that's why I said that I freeze mine, just because I accounted for the time that it takes for me to actually drive to the composter that I use, and by that time it's de-thawed. So
All right, so this is how we're going to play our game. You guys are going to try to guess how to properly dispose this item. And I'll give you a hint. Some items have more than one answer. So in your chat, you're going to type 1 for compost bin, 2 for worm bin, 3 for bokashi bin, 4 for landfill, and 5 for recycling collection. Hint, there might be more than one answer. And if you're on your phone and you want to participate, go ahead and just shout out what you think your answer is. So for the first one and for all of these, I will explain things afterwards in case there's any discrepancy. But let's see, oh, we got a question beforehand. Is it beneficial to add wastewater to a regular compost bin? I might have, so the answer is yes and no. It depends on the wastewater, and it also depends on your system. You want to have, if you're going to be throwing out a whole boiled water bin full of, pasta water, you want to make sure that it can drain out very easily, because that's a lot of water that you're adding to your compost system, and it may or may not need all of that water. But other than that, I mean, like boiled water's fine. As long as it's not wastewater, and I know that wastewater means it's like a catch-all term, but like nothing toxic, nothing like super oily. You don't want a lot of oil in the system, but I've heard that you can dump a lot of your boiled water in your compost bin. And if you guys have anything to add on to that, go ahead.
Just water.
Yeah, I mean, if it's hot water, then anything over like 140 degrees, you're going to start killing off microbes. So you don't want to do anything like that. Also, if things start getting too wet, like you were mentioning, then you're going to start developing other problems. Even like in the vermicompost, if you're putting too much water in there, you'll start getting these like white worms, and you're going to think that they're like little baby worms. You'll be like, oh yeah, a bunch of baby worms, but it's a whole nother type of species of worms. They're not bad, but they do grow and they do take up room and stuff. So keep that in mind too, that the more water you add, the more you're just changing the whole, system that you have there, and could be bad for you.
Exactly. All right. So as you keep putting in your questions, we'll get them answered, but let's play some games. So the first one, it's really easy. Newspaper. How do you dispose of newspaper? Once again, 1 for compost bin, 2 for worm bin, 3 for bokashi bin, 4 for landfill, 5 for recycling collection.
And keep in mind as well that it could be several different ones.
Yeah. And I might have to explain things too, so keep that in mind.
Okay, so we're seeing definitely some for compost bin, for worm bin, all of the above, bokashi bin as well.
Cool. I'll give you guys a hint for landfill. I only put that as an answer if that's the absolute only physical way for that particular item. So just keep that in mind. Landfill should always be the last option for things.
Okay, that's 5.
So, okay. The answer I have, and I will explain myself, is I have a compost bin, worm bin, and recycling bin. Now, I mentioned before that you can use paper and newspaper to help soak up your bokashi bin, but it's not needed in the system. If that's not the reason that you need it, I wouldn't recommend putting too much in it. But black and white print only as well. Color print has to go to recycling collection only. A lot of color ink is full of toxins that you don't want to release in your compost at all. And only add to bokashi to soak up liquid, otherwise you don't need it.
And in newspapers, some of the times they also have, images and pages that aren't actually that paper that you want. And it's like a glossy, I think you were talking about it later, but a glossy finish to it. And a lot of them, are in color. So it's just like between the glossy finish and the ink, it's something that you just don't want in your composts.
Yeah. One thing about composting with newspapers and stuff is that you got to be aware of what kind of chemicals they have to be using on the ink inside all of those. So yeah, like what you're saying, colored would be really bad to use. Black and white, I mean, it could still be bad. We don't know what kind of, chemicals are in there. But to be arguing on the play devil's advocate here, you can use newspaper in bokashi if you wanted to. And there's also a recipe online for like how to make bran out of it too. So I mean, you could, but again, you're adding some weird stuff to there, and then the tea is going to come out there with the chemicals too. So you probably don't want to, but I mean, it would still, get devoured and fermented same way. So to throw that in.
And the great thing about composting is that you learn everything and figure it out as you go. Looks like I have a question from Lisa. Can the use of possibly toxic paper if you're only putting the results on ornamentals? I mean, yes and no. I don't know why you would use compost for ornamental reasons, but even if it's on display, there will be other things that will be exposed to toxins like pets or just normal bugs if you care about bugs. Like if you were to take that toxic chemicals and put it and degrade it in a compost and then you put it out in a park or something, that would now be exposed to chemicals that you do not necessarily want. So theoretically, yes, but I definitely would not recommend it just because you don't know who those toxins are going to affect. And the heat will release toxins even further. And that heat risk can, if you compost it and you're, smelling your own compost, who knows if those toxic chemicals are going to reach you just indirectly. So I would not recommend that. All right, next one.
I mean, ornamentals are flowers. You're not going to eat them either. So, I mean, if you had to and you had it, you could, but you don't know what kind of ornamentals they are either, because some plants could actually absorb more than other plants and actually take that in there, and then all of a sudden it's like a poisonous ornamental. And if a dog or something comes around and eats it or something, then it's like, spraying the toxins that way. But guess it's better than a landfill.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, next one. Next one is, hold on, frozen. There we go. Orange peel. Oh crap, you saw the answer. But pretend you guys didn't and put your answers down. And I'll have my explanation of why I put this as my answer later. All right, so I did bokashi, and Adam, you can get your opinion on this. Do your worms eat orange peels? Have you ever tried to feed them orange peels?
Yeah, so they take their time on it. It won't eat right away. So a lot of time, like with any sort of large pieces of food scraps, it's good. They're gonna take their time on that type of stuff. They'll eat anything that's smaller, more easier to handle before they start doing that. But eventually, you'll start seeing that it's disappearing and then it's gone. Yeah, any sort of big chunks of anything really, if even the manure and stuff you put in there, they eat it. But if you don't have it ground up or broke down into like a smaller bit to at least like a quarter-inch by quarter-inch or so, then it's going to be sticking around longer. And then while it's sticking around, it'll probably start molding and breaking down and composting in that way while it's in the worm bin too. So yeah, that might, it might compost itself before. So yeah, yes and no.
And then they are not bothered by the acidity at all?
They'll move away from it. Like if I put the bokashi, like the fermented vegetables from the bokashi stuff in there, they move away from it for a little bit, but then they also return back to it and start eating it as well, especially if it's like from a vegetable or fruit, and that's the most dominant part in there. They enjoy those type of things. I even know a guy that put a whole bunch of grapes that were from a winery. So they were all fermented very strongly inside his worm bin. And the worms eventually started to eat those too. And they had a pretty good time. That was a little worm party going on down there. And yeah, they turned it into some really, really good vermicompost that way. So they do eat the stuff, but it just takes them a little bit to get used to it because it's just out of their diet a little. So.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the same reason why I only put bokashi. For compost bin and worm bin, they say that the acidity it may mess up the system. The debate is on, but you could try putting it in small quantities and definitely shred it to smaller pieces to see if it will be eaten and decomposed. So that's my explanation. You can fight me for it. Up next, we got bread. Oh, did I mention bread? I think I did. Let's see. What do you guys think? Where can we put bread? Right.
something to do.
All right. Looks like we have bokashi. We got maybe worms. We got some 1, 2, 3s. Is that what we're seeing? Looks like. All right. So my answer is bokashi bin, maybe compost bin, and maybe worm bin. So whoever put those maybes in there was a pretty good idea. I don't know about recycling collection. I don't know any recycling collections that collect bread.
You make croutons.
They make croutons.
Yeah, there you go. Ever heard of bread pudding? It's pretty good stuff.
Bread pudding, croutons.
So in the
Yeah.
compost bin, like I said, the debate is on whether you want to put it in your bin or not. Some say it gets too mushy. Some say it changes the acidity. Some say it attracts pests. So I haven't been able to find a clear consensus on whether bread is good or not. And it might just depend on the system that you're doing. So I would recommend testing it out in small doses. Definitely cutting it up into small pieces will help. And some worms just don't like bread. I haven't tested it out enough. I tend to eat my bread. But if your bread is if your worms are one of those worms that just don't choose not to eat bread, and it might be because it gets stale too quickly, might not have to give them the bread. And the mold thing is always a risk as well. You never want to try to putrefy your system. So if there's tons of green mold growing on your bread, don't add it to your bokashi composter. I think did I have a question? I know someone posted in the chat. If not, next up is tea bags. Let me know what you think of tea bags. I don't think I mentioned this at all in my presentation. So let's see what you guys think we could use tea bags for. I like Lisa says she keeps her bread frozen so it's never wasted. That's a brilliant idea, reducing your food waste. All right, so we got ones. Let's see, what do you guys think we got?
Yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3s, 1, 2s.
All right, so this is what I have. I have compost bin, worm bin, and landfill. And I know I said I wouldn't put landfill unless it was the final option. Let me explain myself. So for compost bin, worm bin, tea bags are great if they're made from paper material. You can usually tell they're paper. They're easy to rip. You know, they're soft. They when they're wet, they start to break down very easily. You can even look at the recipe or the make of it and see if it's actually made with paper. But those are great paper things to throw in your bins. Bokashi bin, it's such a small thing. I wouldn't bother adding it in there anyway. The ingredients inside might be great, but the paper bags, you might as well just put them in your other compost bins. But if it's made out of nylon or plastic, send that to the landfill. Don't put that plastic material in your compost bin.
Yeah, this is why I've been getting into more loose leaf teas lately, you know, with like metal strainers, just to kind of eliminate that, is this plastic, is this paper, you know, and so you always know that it can go to the compost.
Definitely. Create less waste and then you don't have to deal with it afterwards.
That's right.
Looks like we have, can you break it up and put it in a compost? The tea bags, yes, you can. Everything, the whole bag and all the ingredients inside. You will definitely want to tear it up, help it break down, shred it just as normal. But you, as long as it's not nylon or plastic, and sometimes it might be harder to tell, but you want to make sure that it's paper material, and then you can break it up and put it in your compost.
Luckily, the tea's already pretty much broken up.
Yeah, just the tea bag itself. So it says, even for the nylon, can you put compost the inside? So anything that's artificially made, like synthetic, especially plastics, those always have a risk of putting the toxic chemicals. Once it starts leaching, especially when it starts getting hot, it might leach into your compost bin. So definitely don't add any extra necessarily toxic items in your system. So plastic, I think we talked about colored paper, glossy paper, anything like that, try to avoid putting in your compost bin. All right, up next we have autumn leaves. So I don't know if I actually mentioned what to do with autumn leaves, but hopefully you guys can, figure out where it goes. Maybe you saw some pictures with some autumn leaves in there.
Brown organic matter.
Yep, brown organic. I heard a 1, 2, 3 from the audience. Ooh, someone says, ooh, not 3. Ooh. We got some 4s. I should have thrown out, I'll add something to this. I'll add an amendment to my answer later, but it looks like it's got a long answer. Ooh.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. I think that was from my mom. All right, Lisa says compost. Some areas have recycling collection. 2 to 3 if cut up small, might not be able to tolerate oaks. So the answer I have is 1, 2, and 5. So Lisa was right. We actually do have a yard waste collection here in Las Vegas. I think it's like a brown bin or something. So you definitely can get that from Republic Services and start recycling. If not, this is great brown material, carbon material to add to your compost, where you need carbon in it, which is your compost bin and your worm bin. And just as I think Lisa said, make sure to break it up into smaller pieces just so that it breaks down faster. I will add this amendment. You want to be cautious of gasoline, pet waste, and pesticides. So for instance, if your leaves are resting in your on your driveway and you have gasoline on there, or if your dog pees on the leaves, or you use toxic pesticides for your weeds in your lawn or your backyard, you want to make sure that none of that toxic chemicals is going to be brought into your compost system. So it's very, you got to be very particular on what autumn leaves you get from and make sure that you're not exposing it to toxic chemicals. We got fish and meat scrap. I think I mentioned a little bit of where those go. Once again, compost bin for 1, worm bin for 2, 3 for bokashi, 4 for landfill, and 5 for recycling.
I know the in-vessel composter isn't a choice, but that's one.
And I will.
4.
All right, so we got a few answers. Looks like we got some 3s and some 4s, and Andy's totally correct. Fish and meat and dairy products can break down in a composter if it's big enough and it gets hot enough. Unfortunately, a backyard composter, a compost bin is never going to get that hot. It's only going to rot and it's only going to attract pests. But that's the ones that we're talking about. So I'm going to put my answers as bokashi. Bokashi, you can put your food scraps and meat scraps and bones, whatever you want in there. Just make sure it's shredded. It's one of the only.
That's right.
Yep. And
Yeah, I've experienced it. Yes.
Yep,
Cool.
me too. And as soon as it's done fermenting, it won't attract pests anymore. Once you put it in a composter or feed it to your worms or bury it underground, it's pretty nice system. Once again, you can't throw it away if you don't have a bokashi bin, but bokashi is the answer. And I just mentioned again, make sure to boil your bones or try to break them down as much as you can. That'll just make it faster to break down. Next up, we have a pizza box. Pizza box is cardboard, right?
4.
I wonder what we got.
Context.
We got a 4. I think that was for my mom again. We got lots of 4s. Lots of 4s. All right. 4, 4, 4. Oh, look, we got a picture from Lisa. 1 and 2, if not 1, 2, and 5, if not greasy, usually 4. Interesting answer, Lisa. So, my answer, once again, is up to debate. Is compost bin, worm bin, and landfill. So, you can put it in a bokashi. You want that to use, once again, to soak up a lot of liquid. Anytime you put carbon material in the bokashi composter, but it's not needed, and I wouldn't recommend adding new things to the system unless you really need it. But for a compost bin and a worm bin, make sure to shred and bury the compost very deeply. Imagine flies and bugs. They're going to be attracted to this box. You want to make sure to shred it up very small and bury it deep in your composter. And you guys were correct on landfill. If it is very greasy, put it in a landfill. The grease will just putrefy and it will attract a lot of pests. So you could use your best judgment. If there's just a bunch of grease, just put it in the landfill. And never recycle a pizza box. It is dirty. Never put it in a recycling bin.
At the Rebel Recycling Center, when we did a workshop once on what to compost and what not to, they said, pretty much just keep in mind that, the top of the box can usually always be composted or recycled because the grease doesn't actually come into contact with the top of the box, but then the bottom you scrap.
Be a good judge on grease and never risk attracting pets to your system. So if you think it's best to just throw it away, just throw it away. Don't bother with it. But it is possible to compost.
Tori, I had a question. Wait,
Yeah.
about the tea.
About the what?
Is it the tea?
Uh-huh.
When you put it in your garden and stuff and you do a little bit and if the dog or the cat drinks it, is it okay?
So ideally you want to put it in soil directly so that your pets never get exposed to it. I will say that when you bury your bokashi, make sure that your pets aren't watching, because I had my pets figure out where I buried it, undug it, and ate it, and it made them sick. They just threw it up, all the contents, and then the next day they were fine. So that might be the worst that happens, is that they throw it up, just because it's a highly concentrated mix of different food that they probably don't want to, they probably shouldn't be having. But if you poured it down the soil, as long as they're not digging up and eating your soil, which they might be doing anyway, so you want to prevent that, there should be really no way for them to be exposed to the tea. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
it did. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, up next we have eggshells. So eggshells, I don't know if I mentioned this. I use them, so I know some people might be vegan, so they might be not using eggshells. But where do you guys think we can dispose of them?
And if not compostable, they can definitely go into the garden right away.
Yeah, I should have added that as a section. Eggshells provide a lot of calcium directly to your garden, and this goes along with food waste as well. I'll be talking while you guys give your answers. There's a lot of different foods that you can bury directly in your pot of soil, your house plant, in your garden, like without even composting, and that will be great for them. So I've heard banana peels are the same. Chop up some bananas and dig them in. Or if you don't care that they'll take a long time to break down, put straight banana peels in there. If you have dogs, make sure to bury it deep. But eggshells are like that too. Sprinkle them directly on top of your garden, and your plants will thank you for the extra calcium and nutrients. All right, I don't have the chat up. What do you guys
One,
think?
1, 2, and 3.
3.
Is that an overall consensus? 1, 2, and 3? I
Yes.
think you guys are right. 1, 2, and 3. All the shells. I put them in my worm bin. My worms love to eat it. And if I'm too lazy to make it useful for the worms, I just throw it in my bokashi bin. But keep in mind, eggshells can carry salmonella. So you never want to risk that to your compost or your worms. So eggshells, it's recommended to boil them, dry them, and make them into a powder. I've tried just boiling and drying my eggs and smashing them into my worm bin. The worms won't eat them in time. It'll just sit there and be eggshells. So it has to be grounded into a powder for it to be utilized. All right. That's it for the game. Hopefully you guys had a lot of fun. And I know the Facebook viewers out there, hope you guys enjoyed the extra time for the extra game. Any final questions? Anything else anyone wants to add?
Oh yeah, I actually had a question for Andy. You said that you work at Starbucks. Do you take like the coffee grinds and use those at all?
Well, I've worked at 3 different Starbucks locations, in the Valley, and all 3 of those had very different ways that they did the grounds for garden. Actually, at my first Starbucks location, they didn't have it, and I started it up at that location just because, I had heard about it, that the corporation was doing that. And,
Right.
any bags that didn't get taken home within a specific amount of time, because they are so damp, we found that they would get quite moldy. And so what I do is, I take and we package them up using the same coffee bags, like the 5-pound coffee bags that, are used to load the hopper for the Mastrena machines for the espresso. And I would come to the community garden and the in-vessel composter with maybe like 6 or 7 bags just so it didn't go to waste, and just bring them in my car. And I had to keep in mind they had to be sealed up pretty well, because once or twice they definitely spilled in the back of my car. But that was at the first location that I did that, and brought them to the in-vessel composter just because it was a mass of coffee grounds. But then at this one that I'm at now, it's brand new, so of course I'm going to talk to my boss about getting it started up. But yeah, it's the Starbucks grounds for garden thing that they do. So
Awesome.
it helps, but I mean it kind of doesn't take away also from all of the other waste that we inevitably have to create by just
Right.
every day-to-day jobs with like milk gallons and such. But I mean, at least it's something, I guess.
Yeah. That's it.
Right.
Yeah, I even use those in bokashi, and it adds a really interesting aroma to the tea, as well as make all the teas a very dark black color and stuff. So yeah, I really like using coffee grounds, especially because I always wake up every day with a cup of coffee. So putting it inside the bokashi also helped to keep the smell down of anything else that was in there before it started to actually ferment too. So
Especially if you do your own coffee at home, it's gives you a lot smaller amounts of coffee grounds that you have to compost. But if you wanted to, you could go to your local Starbucks and investigate and ask them if they have their grounds for garden going, because if not, like they could easily just empty out a drawer of the espresso pods and give that to you in like a paper bag.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like a store by store basis.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, it's my the person I work with through the USDA. They were recommending me to do that, and they just built a new Starbucks here in Pahrump too. So I'm definitely gonna have to go over there and see what they're doing with those grounds.
Cool.
For sure.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, you can use coffee grinds in almost every type of compost system. They're great, and you can even bury on them directly in your garden. They're great too, and it smells great.
Yeah.
Not when it's moldy in your back seat, but.
All right. Any further questions or anything else before we end our workshop? Well, thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed the game. Thank you to my co-host for helping me out with this adventure. And I will see you guys later. Thank you so much. Happy composting.
All right, it was nice talking to you
All
all.
right, happy composting. Yep, same.
Thank you.
You're welcome.